Hey guys, Rollout here with LEGO Transformers movie Soundwave. Optimus Prime and Bumblebee are without a doubt the two most iconic Autobots, but the Decepticon of second importance to Megatron is up for debate. Personally, I think it's Soundwave. He's competent, he's loyal, and the Decepticon symbol literally looks like his face. I also like the parallels between him and Megatron, how in G1 they both transform into handheld objects, and how in Revenge of the Fallen they both transform into Cybertronian vehicles. Now the original Deluxe class toy from 2009 is technically a triple changer, although the two alt modes aren't particularly distinct. That said, I think it makes sense for Soundwave to have a mode of travel that's more convenient than floating around as a satellite, so here he is in Cybertronian jet mode. Now this form never makes an appearance in the film, so I have taken some artistic liberties. His head is fully visible in vehicle mode, just like Megatron, but instead of it facing upward, I've moved it up to the top so that he's facing forward. The same goes for his chest cannon here. I've moved the wings a little bit further back, and then instead of these panels folding around and becoming the thrusters, I've given him some proper jet engines towards the rear, and then these become stabilizer fins or some kind of engine housings, I guess. I think this mode looks pretty good considering it was a complete afterthought. In some ways, it actually sort of reminds me of Megatron's jet mode from the first movie. Of course, this isn't his main form, but as you can imagine, getting him there isn't super complicated. First, we're going to fold down these front panels here and align those to the best of our ability. Next, we're going to take this bottom panel, bring that down, and rotate it around. The wings will fold forward and then swing off to the side. Finally, we're going to take these top panels and bring them out. Get everything situated. And there you have Soundwave in satellite mode. If I'm honest, I've always preferred this to his Mercedes from the third movie. I just think thematically, Soundwave as a satellite makes more sense. Now, I didn't base this off of the toy. Instead, I used concept art and stills from the movie as reference, and so his overall structure is very different than what you might remember from the old Deluxe class. Most importantly, he has this main central structure from which everything else connects. There are two distinct planes of various satellite dishes. He is meant to have a couple of extra panels that stick off the back here, but I did decide to forgo a few details just for the sake of streamlining his transformation. This back array is comprised of three relatively identical dishes. These two have a couple of mounted antennae, but otherwise they are exactly the same, featuring these circular sonic emitters here. There are a couple of those also present on these larger dishes at the front. Even though that isn't entirely accurate, I mostly did that for robot mode, but I do like how that extra bit of blue ties his color scheme together. Of course, he has these two main wing-like panels here. Each is equipped with a thruster so that he can maneuver around. Of course, those are attached on a multitude of joints, so you can position them any which way. He is quite articulate for a satellite. All of these panels here are connected on ball joints. You can, of course, rotate his head, and even his midsection has some articulation. Each half of the satellite is connected to the central column on a pivot so that you can reposition the cannon. The more experimental you get posing all of his appendages, the more you require a stand. I like to mount him using this back panel here, and something like this works well enough. As for additional accessories in this mode, what would the modern Soundwave be without some creepy tentacles? I've strung together a number of robot hands here, and it allows for some really organic articulation. These can connect in a number of different ways. You can attach them to the clips down here. You can attach them to the antenna. In the movie, they come from his midsection. I'm sure you can do that somehow, but personally, I prefer to attach them to the back of these panels. It's simple, and it gets the job done. But of course, hacking into enemy communications isn't all he's capable of as a satellite. He can also deploy various minions down to Earth by ejecting them from his chest. First up is Ravage. I've tried to make them as small as I possibly can while still retaining a certain level of recognizable detail. He ends up being close to minifigure scale, which means he doesn't quite fit with most of my other Transformers, but I think he looks acceptable alongside Soundwave, and really, that's all that matters. I especially like the way the face turned out. I've used this rounded edge here to give definition to his jaw, and then I've attached these minifigure hands in a way that causes a split in the bricks, making it look like he's snarling. Then I've placed a quarter slice piece on top here, which has a gap in the corner, and that is meant to represent his cycloptic eye. He's got the cannons on top and the barbed tail, which is built using the same technique as Soundwave's tentacles. For articulation, the legs can each move forward and back. They can rotate in the middle. The waist can rotate, the head can rotate, and even move up and down a little bit. You can sort of fold him up into a re-entry mode if you want, but at this scale, I've just decided to ignore his transformation. I've also built Laserbeak, who is very similarly close to minifigure scale, but also just a bit too big for Bumblebee. That said, I do really like his proportions. He has a wide wingspan utilizing these Chima elements. He has the vulture-like crook in his neck. The clip on this robot arm is sort of meant to look like his beady eyes. He's got some very interesting techniques going on in the body, and I've added a splash of red on the turbines and the tail feathers, but otherwise he's built in a very similar style to Ravage. For articulation, the tail can move a little bit, the head can bob up and down, the beak can go left and right, the feet can rotate, but the legs are tethered to the wings on a pivot here. Those can flap on their own, and you can also reconnect them on this stud to get them folded up and things like that. No, he does not transform at this scale, but I think expecting something like this to turn into an office printer or a computer monitor is just a little bit unreasonable. Here are the three of them together, and while, once again, they are out of scale, I think they make for a nice team. In my opinion, Ravage and Laserbeak strike this nice balance between being formidable, but not too big. They are still clearly his minions. But it does call into question how this guy is supposed to launch out of his chest cannon. For that, you can just use your imagination. It's not like mass shifting is unheard of in the Transformers universe. Finally, here are the big four in vehicle mode, and just like how I think Bumblebee complements Optimus really well, stylistically, Megatron and Soundwave look awesome together. His transformation into robot mode is interesting because he ends up in a very different shape than the one he starts out as. You'll see what I mean once we get there. First, we're going to take these panels on top and swing them up. Then the wings will come back, and these front panels here will open up. Now we're going to take this entire assembly and rotate it around until these ball joints meet this back plate. Just like that. Next, we're going to take this bottom panel, rotate it around, and bring it up. Fold it in half, and sit it into place, just like this. The wings will then come down and sort of fit onto this corner here. Nothing really pegs into place, but everything has a place to go where it kind of just nestles. You'll know when it's in the right position. Similarly, we're going to take these side panels here and rest them on top of this tile. Do the same over here. The antenna will flip back, and then the chest will fold into place. Just like that. The shoulders are going to sort of fit over these corners here. So rotate these around and then sit them down just like this. This plate here will sort of rest on top of the socket. Again, it doesn't peg into place, but it snuggles in there nicely. Now all that's left to do is work on the limbs. So bring the arms down, bend the elbows, and fold up the shoulder armor. Then swing the legs forward, bend the knee, rotate the foot, and rotate the thigh armor to give that definition. Do the same over here. And there you have Soundwave in robot mode. If you didn't believe me before, it's pretty apparent now that I did not base this on any of the toys. The deluxe class never really felt like Soundwave to me, with its wings and weird skinny limbs. But his robot never makes an appearance in the movie, and I used that as an opportunity to get creative. I primarily based this on a piece of concept art from Revenge of the Fallen that depicts what his robot mode was supposed to look like. And it is a hulking mass of scrap metal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will put a link in the description so you can go have a look. I think it takes things too far in the opposite direction, and I found the silhouette for this guy somewhere in between. He's still wide and stocky, but he isn't completely monstrous. I really like how he goes from a spindly looking satellite into a relatively bulky looking robot. Although the nature of his transformation does mean he ends up quite hollow and gappy in certain places, but I think he sells the illusion well enough. Now, Bayformer's Soundwave almost always has these three circular details, but I wanted the central element to be his cannon so that Ravage and Laserbeak still eject from his chest, just like in G1. He has all of these sonic emitters across his body, and I imagine him stomping down and blasting the enemy away with, well, sound waves, as the name would suggest. For articulation, his head can rotate, his shoulders are on ball joints, his elbows can bend, his hips are on ball joints, and his knees can bend, so pretty standard stuff. In this mode, he can deploy his computer hacking tentacles from his chest, sort of like Transformers Prime Soundwave. They actually connect in the exact same place that they do in satellite mode, just at a different angle. I think that's sort of cool. I also felt like he needed a firearm, so I put together this neat-looking handgun. It's actually based on his blasters from Dark of the Moon, and I really like how all of these rounded bits come together on top. It's just a sleek-looking weapon, and I think it suits Soundwave really well. Here he is with Ravage, who I think is appropriately pet-sized. He is certainly a trusty companion. And then, just based on the way I have him posed, you can imagine that Laserbeak is able to mount to his arm as well. But the way he does this is a little bit unexpected. If you bend his elbow 90 degrees, you're actually able to hook the minifigure hands on Laserbeak's tail around his shoulder armor and his forearm. And that allows him to perch rather nicely, just like that. Once again, they are out of scale, but I think they're just small enough for this to work. For comparison, here is a minifigure, and here is Bumblebee. Now, while we've got him on the spot, there's something I'd like to call to attention. Isn't it a little bit strange that Bumblebee is the one who kills all three of these characters? Across 2 movies, he brutally murders a family of 3 practically by himself. Like, wartime casualties are one thing, but this is some kind of bloodthirsty vendetta that we do not fully understand. That aside, last but not least, here are the big 4 together in robot mode, and I really like how they size up. Megatron is just a bit taller than Optimus, Soundwave is just a bit shorter than that, and then Bumblebee is the shortest of them all. It feels right. I also made a conscious effort so that the 4 of them stylistically parallel each other on multiple different levels as far as color scheme, complexity, parts usage, and overall design language goes. I really wanted them to feel like they come from the same universe. I wanted them to look good together, and I think they do. So, until next time, this has been Rollout, signing off.